So, hi, welcome to the Monday video post, but it's Tuesday. What are you going to do? I had a very full day on Monday and wasn't able to actually get this thing up and running. My request for your requests has yielded great fruit. My friend Cliff has suggested all sorts of things, including sort of a debate, a compare and contrast, if you will, a juxtaposition of whether the hair shirt or flagellation is, which is it? He didn't even ask. He's like, just compare and contrast. Got lots of suggestions like that. Hair shirt's about fashion. Flagellation is maybe a new 21st century kind of exercise program. I don't know. But before I get to wonderful suggestions like that, I wanted to get through the John Hughes stuff first. And one of the suggestions was just a little fleshing out of what's happening with John Hughes and the sermon series. It's Tuesday. I'm in my office. If you hadn't noticed. The computer's actually on my desk. I'm on the other side. You can see some books and stuff. I like the office. It's a good office. It's very generous. It's nice. It's the Sanctum Sanctorum. Anyway. So I'm not going to... Anyway, right. I'm talking quickly. I'm not going to give you the whole sermon, but I did want to share a little bit of it with you, just to give you a sense of where these things are going. There's a blog post about it. For those of you who read my blog, it's the July 27th post. I touch on it a little bit in there, what I was sort of after. Essentially, this is what we know. Now, the movie that we watched this past week was 16 Candles. And it's the first movie that Molly Ringwald and John Hughes do together. It's what inspired John Hughes to trust Molly Ringwald with Pretty in Pink, which was the first film that we actually had the sermon series begin with. It was great fun. What I did with Pretty in Pink, if you don't remember, again, it was in the blog post. Tenderness is blessedness, is perfection. I showed the video clip of Ducky lip-syncing Tenderness by Otis Redding. And it was lots of fun. I'm showing certain video clips from the movie as scripture. Anyway, so Ducky sings, Otis Redding sings the gospel according to John Hughes. The rich young man is a scripture passage I used from Matthew. So the rich young man is actually, in being asked to give up his wealth, is actually being asked to give up his burdens. There was an honor system at the time about wealth, and it was just wealth and honor. Land wealth means honor. That's simply what it's about. So I suggested that the common theme between the gospel according to John Hughes and the gospel according to Matthew is this sense of what honor is. And in both instances, people are being asked to let go of what they think makes them honorable. Their alternative style or their wealth or their sense of poverty. Molly Ringwald's character has a strong sense of what her poverty means. We are to embrace what's truly honorable. In the case of the Gospel of Matthew, it's blessedness or perfection. And for the Gospel according to John Hughes, it's tenderness. That each has to learn to let go of these strange false burdens and learn to be tender with themselves and one another. All of this leads to the second sermon on the Gospel according to John Hughes, which is this one on 16 Candles, about being lost or forgotten. Basically, it's a very simple premise. What I talked about in the film or in the sermon is that in the film, each character is lost or forgotten, or both. Samantha, her 16th birthday, is forgotten. She's forgotten by her family in the midst of the chaos of her older sister Jenny's wedding. Jenny, in a sense, has forgotten herself. Her parents have, they're all forgotten. Everyone's forgotten. The geek, Anthony Michael Hall's character, is forgotten quite intentionally by lots of people. He's actually left in a glass coffee table, which is the clip I showed on Sunday. Or Jake, who's also, by the way, forgotten, he's lost and forgotten by his girlfriend, by his friends who trash his parents' house, and his parents are out of town yet again. And are they one that's left to question if they are that kind of family that substitutes their wealth for their love. Meaning Jake gets a bright red Porsche to compensate for the fact that his parents are never in town. All of these folk are lost and forgotten. If you go through the film, everyone is either lost or forgotten at some point. And what John Hughes does at the end of the movie is show the love that can come through a parent's apology for forgetting their daughter, through Jake actually chasing down Samantha at the end and helping her celebrate her 16th birthday, or her wish has already been granted. That really what John Hughes is saying is that in spite of all this, in spite of what feels like being forgotten and feels like being lost, can be overcome with love. Our status of being the lost people is overcome with love. I paralleled this with the shepherd and the sheep. Jesus has a parable in Matthew about there being 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, and the good shepherd always goes to find the lost sheep, and upon finding the lost sheep rejoices, and always rejoices greater for the sheep that is lost and then was found than over the 99 who were never lost in the first place. This is a quality of God. God seeks us out when we're lost. God seeks us out when we are forgotten. The connection I made, that's essentially the sermon, but the other connection I made, the thread I also tried to weave in, and I don't know how successful it was, but this is the piece I just couldn't let go. There's a temptation with a movie like 16 Candles and bringing it into a church context to go through each of the sort of debaucherous scenes and say, oh, young people shouldn't drink, or young people shouldn't be left alone, and oh, parents are trouble, and I mean, there are all these things you could go through. There's even an anti-racism line you could take with the treatment of the character Long Duck Dong, Japanese actor playing a Chinese character who's, yeah, it's a mess. And there's actually been a lot of activism against the film because of Long Duck Dong's presence in it. What I talk about actually is how all that's a distraction. All the moralism that one could rest upon in interpreting a movie like this is actually a distraction from the greater message. And the same kind of distraction exists from the church. There's a tendency in church to go after the social ill. We're going to ban smoking. We're going to bring about prohibition, alcohol prohibition in this country. We saw how well that worked. The idea is that this is a general good. And in a sense it is, absolutely. Pointing out the social ill, naming it, is a good. You know, I'm one first to say war, bad. War is always a sin, without exception. And people agree or disagree with me, but this is the position of a religious community, an ethical religious community, to point out these things. But it doesn't end there. It's not enough to just talk about the issue. You have to then offer something else. And I talked about how 12-step programs, the example I gave was in 12-step programs, you admit you have a problem. You name the problem. The second and third steps have to do with God, your higher power, however you name God. You have to introduce something else. It's not simply enough to say, that's a problem. You have to introduce something else. And that's what John Hughes is able to do. It's not just that Sam's forgotten and then suddenly remembered. It's that Sam is given love. It's not enough that Jake figures some stuff out, that maybe he was lost and forgotten, but then he introduces something else. The same with Samantha's parents. They introduce something else. That's the key. That's the thing that's so cool about the film, and actually what I think is cool about church in general. If the church is doing their job, it's not just social activism, but engages the world and introduces God, reintroduces God, or simply points out where God might be. That's where it is. It's not enough to simply say that X is a bad thing. That's all sorts of groups can do that, and that's great. And it's good that we do, but it's not enough. Yeah, so that was the sermon. I've just thought about Martin Luther King's quotation, someone will do better than I will with it, but how essentially he said, you know, I would rather my brother love me. That's what the gospel calls us to, is to love one another. But if my brother cannot love me, I'd like to at least have a law in the books that keeps him from lynching me. Lynching, bad. Laws against lynching, good. But the truth is that we are called to love one another. So there you go. That's the gospel according to John Hughes, week 2. Next week will be Weird Science. For our church, we do communion on the first Sunday of the month. So it also happens to be a communion Sunday. I've said this a lot, but I'm really excited about Weird Science on Communion Sunday. So there you go. I hope you all are well. This is 10 minutes, 10 and a half minutes. It's very long, but thank you for sticking around. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you later.